be a religious Vaishnava scholar, but also to be such a sweet devotee, and he really presents the philosophy of Krishna consciousness that is relatable. It's it's relevant and relatable at the same time. And he really presents what our previous acharyas have spoken. Really presents us that movie, so I appreciate that. And so Radhika Prabhu did his PhD when he was 22 years old from Oxford, and currently he's a chair at Charles Red Chair of Religious Studies and serves as director of Religious Studies program at Utah State University. Yeah. And so let's please give a warm welcome to
Thank you so much, for that very kind introduction. I just want to start off by saying that this topic is on finding and becoming a mentor. It's a short seminar on mentoring, and it's quite appropriate because I just received news this morning that one of my closest mentors from childhood, His Holiness Gopal Krishna Goswami, is in critical condition in India, and so I just want to begin by saying that this seminar I'd like to dedicate as an offering to him, as an example of mentorship in my life. I'll have some chance to share this in the next hour and a half we have together, but I have had the good fortune to have many wonderful mentors in my life, and so in some sense this seminar is a tribute to what I have learned from them and the qualities I've seen embodied in them. At the same time, it's also a product of the experience with being a mentor that I have had in the last about 25 years now. 20 years of full-time teaching in the university, and of course one element of teaching is mentorship, is a key element of that, and then also mentoring now in a more administrative capacity. So I'm serving now as department head for 3 faculties: history, religious studies, and classics, which involves mentoring about 30 to 35 faculty members, plus plenty of students and staff and so on. And then finally, whatever opportunities I've had to both be mentored and offer mentorship in the context of our devotional community. And so that's kind of the background from which I'm speaking today, both from now since childhood, having had wonderful mentors, and then also having had the opportunity to mentor in these various contexts. Okay, so the plan for our session today, first of all, let me see. Okay, so the plan for our session today is that I want to think together, and I mean together, and I'll show you how we're going to do this, but I want to think together about what makes a good mentor, what makes an amazing mentor. And hopefully that process of thinking through this, from experience, from Shastra, hopefully that process will allow us to see both sides of the coin. We all need mentors, and how do we find one that's going to be helpful and not lead us astray or hurt us in some way? And then how do we become a mentor? Because at some point in life, sooner rather than later, we will be called to mentor someone. It doesn't necessarily have to be a grand, moment of now you're a mentor. It's something that happens very naturally in life. And so as we think about what a mentor looks like, hopefully both sides of this equation will become clear. Okay? So that's the plan, but let's start off, rather than me just lecturing at you, I want to start off with a little bit of an exercise, which is to say, ask you to just work in pairs with whoever's sitting next to you. And if you know that person very well, then turn around and find someone else who you don't know so well. And I want you to think about this simple question, okay, which is, think back to the best mentorship experience that you have had in your life, and ask yourself, what made it such a great experience? Perhaps it was some qualities of the mentor, perhaps it was the circumstance in which it was happening, perhaps it was the moment at which it happened, but what made it such an amazing experience? So we're going to work on that, and then I will talk a little bit about mentorship from a Vaishnava perspective. And then I want to also address the other side of the equation, which is what makes a terrible mentoring relationship. What are the potential pitfalls that can happen when we go out looking for a mentor or when we try to mentor others? And we'll think about that together as well, okay? So let's just take, 5 to 7 minutes. Just make sure whoever you're working with, both of you get a chance to share, okay? So if one person's long-winded, just gently tell them, okay, it's my turn now, or vice versa. If they're shy, then encourage them to speak up, okay? So work with a pair, and I'll come back to you in about 5 to 7 minutes. We obviously don't have time to go through everyone, but is there anyone, maybe a few people, who would like to share what attributes, who would like to answer that question for yourself? What about your mentorship experience made it so wonderful? Yes?
My mentor is my grandmother, and even though we're different, she's always been very accepting of my choices as long as I made good, healthy choices for myself, and she's always led by example.
Excellent. So a couple things you said, accepting and then leading by example. And then you qualified the accepting bit with as long as they are healthy choices, right? So perhaps there's also some sense of boundaries or guidance or warning there as well. So it's not just whatever you want, but a sense of guidance as well. So let's put that next to acceptance. Excellent. Who else in the back?
Prabhuji, a mentor is one who knows us more, better, and give customized advice based on our time, place, circumstances where I am at this point.
Okay. So who knows us well? So the advice is not generic, but is really customized to who we are. Yourself.
Best experience with the mentor is when I felt sick.
Best experience is when you felt safe. Can you say a little bit more about what you mean by safe?
Yeah, I was able to really express what I'm going through in a very honest way and not feel judged or, it just felt safe.
Very nice. So safety in the sense of an absence of judgment, that we can be who we are and not feel judged or put down. Yeah, excellent. Thank you. Okay, who else? There's a lot of nice hands. Yes?
He is the one who is our ever well-wisher, and he will always tell us what is right for us, not what we want to hear.
Okay, so what's right for us, not necessarily what we want to hear. And I think that connects earlier to this point that you were making about how there's acceptance, but also with a sense of guidance. Okay, yes?
Patience.
Patience. Say a little bit more about patience.
Patience in the sense that my mentor tolerated my difficulty understanding the subject or the practice that they were trying to teach me, and their dedication to continuing to support me
Yes.
throughout our relationship.
Yes. Even when our journey is slow, then they're being patient and supporting us through that and being willing to give us the time to grow. Wonderful. Thank you. Okay, yes?
The best mentorship experience I've had is when I've actually been vulnerable and honest.
When you've been vulnerable and honest. Excellent. So this is one from the mentee's perspective. Thank you for that. Rather than the mentor's perspective, which is the importance of well, actually it's from both, right? Both the mentor and the mentee. A big part of that relationship that creates that glue is both being willing to be vulnerable in the process, right? Like the mentor not being someone who simply preaches or leads from upon high, and the mentor also not being someone who hides behind a shell of perfection, that both are willing to open themselves up in that relationship. And that vulnerability is the greatest strength of the mentor-mentee relationship. It's also the potential for the greatest abuse as well in that relationship. And so we'll talk about that a little bit later. But thank you for that point. Yes?
The practicality of the instructions or the guidance. How someone can deliver instruction that is something that you could put into effect. It's easy to understand and digest and put into effect almost immediately.
Thank you. Being practical, the instructions being practical, and as someone else said earlier, being relevant, something that's very specific to who we are. Yes? Go ahead.
For me, these are all symptoms. On some levels, I've experienced many of them through unconditional love from the mentor that they've been able to offer.
Tell me a little bit more about this word unconditional.
So, if I'm not vulnerable, they'll try and soften me. If I'm being too vulnerable, perhaps they'll help guide me in a different way. If I'm out of patience, they'll help me with patience. And they're there with you through the process, unconditionally, whatever you're bringing to the table at the moment.
They're there through the process, whatever you might be bringing to the table, is what Prabhu said. Excellent. Thank you. Yes.
Whenever I'm being corrected or put straight, I still feel enthusiastic. It doesn't put me down. It doesn't put me in a place where I feel like bad. It actually gives me life.
I think that's a great point. Even when we are corrected, we still feel enthusiastic, right? We don't feel like we've been destroyed in the process. This is a very crucial element of even in correction, because correction is a big part of mentorship as well. There's both sides. There's the acceptance and then the correction as well. And even that correction is offered from a place of trust enough that one can take it and know that it doesn't devalue who we are as people, right? That it's not devaluing me as a person, it's simply correcting something that I need to get better at. So that ability to, because so often correction can come in the sense of you are worthless, right? And when correction shows up like that, it's very demoralizing. It destroys our enthusiasm for Krishna consciousness or whatever else that we might be doing. So thank you for that point. Yes?
Yeah, I was going to share along the same lines. We approach a mentor with something heavy, and they have this ability to make it lighthearted, but with gravity, and the result is that it's very uplifting.
Yes. Wonderful, wonderful point. So lightheartedness and gravity at the same time. It's not the end of the world. It's important, but it's not the end of the world. And part of that has to do with them also not taking themselves too seriously, right? That, okay, I gave you this piece of advice and you didn't follow it, and look at where you're at today, right? It's not that approach, but really saying, no, we do what we need to do, and through that process, heavy things can become light, and sometimes things that we think are light can become heavy. So having that combination, I think, is wonderful. It's very nice. Okay, I'm going to continue onward here. There's, of course, so many things, and I would encourage you to think through this question a little bit more from your own experience, because we've all had experiences of good or not so good mentorship, and those are crucial in helping us think through this topic. So I want to share with you some thoughts about this from Vaishnava tradition, but I want to start by saying that a mentor is not exactly only a friend. It's somewhere in between friendship and being a boss. Okay, it's more than friendship in the sense that there is an element to mentorship that involves leadership, and it involves guidance, and that involves giving us direction. So there's that friendliness aspect, that commitment, that love that comes with a real friend. But one of the things that are not typical of friendship, at least not friendship that is not a mentorship relationship, mentoring involves some sense of direction and guidance as well. So we might say that friendship is a key component of mentorship. At the same time, that guidance or direction is not being a boss either, right? So all of us have experience at some point in life working with a boss. And people often come back with a terrible taste in their mouth after that experience. No one really wakes up in the morning going, I'm looking for a boss. I need a boss to make my life better, right? Someone who can tell me what I'm supposed to be doing today and what I'm not supposed to be doing today. No. But we do wake up thinking, I need guidance, I need a mentor, right? So there's a difference there. Being a boss is like being an administrator. It's doing the job. Being a boss is like brushing your teeth in the morning. It's something you do, you have to get done. You can always do it better, right? And your dentist tells you that you're not doing it well enough. So there's skill involved. There's skill involved in brushing your teeth. But it's not the sort of thing that gives you purpose and meaning in life. And on the other hand, mentorship is something that truly can and does give you purpose and meaning, both from the perspective of being a mentee and being a mentor. There are few things in this world that are as satisfying, that are as fulfilling as a strong mentor-mentee relationship on both sides. And there's, by the same token, by the other side of the coin, there are few things that can destroy a person as effectively as an abusive mentor-mentee relationship, right? So it's a very powerful tool. It's a very powerful tool that far exceeds the capacities of other forms of administration or leadership, such as being a boss, which can annoy us, it can drive us up the wall, can hurt us, but nothing can grow us or destroy us as effectively as a real mentorship relationship. And so that's why it's really worth thinking through this together. So what makes it such a powerful relationship, and how do we find that in our own lives? And eventually, how do we become that as well ourselves? Okay, so let's think through well, I want to tell you a story, okay? And this story, some of you may have heard, others perhaps not. It's a story about one of, I think, the best mentoring examples in Vaishnava literature, Vaishnava scripture. And this is the person, the sage, named Narada Muni. Narada Muni is a traveling sage. He travels all around the world. He's not bound even by the conveyances of an airplane or a car or a train. He just flies. He travels by the power of his singing, his chanting of Krishna's names, which he does constantly. And he travels through the airwaves of sound through this universe. And he is everywhere in Srimad Bhagavatam. He's everywhere in Vaishnava literature. He's a mentor to everyone from great sages and kings to demons and evil people, to everyone in between. from the rich to the poor, from very urban, civilized sorts of people to people who are, to children, right, who are just beginning their life's journey. There's really no limit to who he's willing to mentor, and he does it in an incredibly effective way. And one of my favorite examples of Narada Muni's mentorship comes from the story that is actually told in Chaitanya Charitamrita. This is the biography of Lord Chaitanya. And in that there's a section that describes Narada Muni's encounter with a hunter. The hunter's name is Mrigari, which basically means hunter. It means the enemy of the animal, so maybe a little stronger than hunter. And we'll see why in a moment. So the story goes like this, okay? But we'll pause to reflect on its mentorship implications. Narada Muni, as he does, he's traveling, and one particular day he visits a beautiful place in northern India called Prayag, which is at the confluence of 3 rivers, Ganga, Yamuna, and Saraswati. At the time, not today anymore, but at the time that was a jungle, a very dense jungle, fertile, rich, subtropical climate, and beautiful place. And he's, after his bath in the river, he's walking through the forest on a forest path and singing. He's wandering, right? He's singing. He often does this. He likes places of natural beauty. This is one of the characteristics of Narada Muni over multiple lives. He likes to see various aspects of Krishna's creation. As he's going down this rather idyllic forest path, he comes across something terrible. He sees an animal just off the path, writhing in pain. Looking closer, he notices that this rabbit has broken limbs, a broken leg or a broken arm, not quite dead, but suffering. As the animal squeals in pain, he walks a little further and notices that there's another animal, in this case a deer, that is in a similar situation. Broken limbs, writhing in pain, and not dying. Clearly shot, but not dying. And yet another, and another. And Narada Muni is so torn by this pain that he decides he needs to find out what's happening here. And he decides to investigate. Now, here, right, as Narada Muni decides to investigate, so look, I want to point out that there's only, Narada Muni's main motivation here, his only motivation for going out to do something about the situation, which is going to lead him into a mentoring relationship. We'll see in a moment. His only reason for doing that is out of compassion, out of kindness. This is the heart of a mentoring relationship. This is what we're looking for in a mentor. This is the reason a mentor acts or works in this world, is out of compassion or kindness. There was nothing that Narada Muni would have gained from that, from helping those poor animals. Those animals were not going to become his disciples. They were not going to give him a nice donation. They were not going to even start chanting Hare Krishna, right? Maybe in some divine sense he was capable of doing that, but not in any ordinary sense. They weren't going to jump up and start becoming devotees, join a temple, do something like that. No, he had no expectations from those animals, right? None. The only expectation here was a genuine desire to help. We encounter so many relationships in this world, and most are transactional in nature. And there's nothing wrong with that. There's nothing wrong. I go to work every day, and I go to work because I get paid. And I'm happy, and my employer's happy, right? That's a transactional relationship. It doesn't make it a bad one or an evil one. There are good transactional relationships and not so good ones. But the most relationships we encounter are transactional. We need something, they need something, right? And we are happy to engage in them. Mentorship is a different kind of relationship. When someone promises to mentor only because they want something from you, that's not likely to end up in a healthy relationship. If they want something from you, then they want something from you. And it should be clear in the relationship. This is what I'm after, and can you provide it? And in return, you should be able to get something too. But in a mentorship relationship, the main attempt or the main goal from the side of the mentor is, how can I help? Right? How can I help? And let me point out that this is not an either-or thing. There can be transactional elements to a relationship and mentorship relationship. So it's not an exclusive thing. So for example, if someone in my department is needing some help of some kind, I've got a transactional relationship with them, right? I'm their boss, I'll determine their raises, I'll do their annual reviews and so on. But for some time, we can put that aside and I can ask the simple question, how can I help? What do you need? And the moment that happens, it's a signal to both sides that he's no longer the boss anymore. This is a mentorship opportunity, right? Same thing in teaching. You might be giving grades to your students. That's not mentoring. It's an important transactional relationship. But during the course of that relationship, there can be times of saying, what do you want to do with yourself? And how can I help? Okay? So how can I help? That sense of giving or compassion. That's the only reason to enter into a mentoring relationship. Otherwise, we can continue with various other kinds of relationships that we might have in life. And that's what motivates Narada Muni to leave the path in the jungle and look for the source of these animals. Now, clearly, he's looking for a hunter, right? Because he sees the arrow, he sees the animal, and yet there's something odd about this hunter, or this person, or whatever he's looking for. Because these animals are not dying, they're just suffering. So Narada Muni decides to leave the path in the jungle and go find the hunter. Now think about that for a minute. Leaving the path in the jungle. There's great risk involved in that. Right? There's a challenge there. What are potential problems when you leave the path in a forest or in a jungle? What could go wrong?
Get lost.
Number one, you could get lost, right? This is a jungle, and there's a reason they put trails, right? And the trails are marked, and losing the trail can mean getting lost, okay? So that's one big danger. What's another danger that's possible? You could get hurt, right? Either because you're eaten by wild animals, of which there were plenty at that time in India. Okay? You could be eaten up, attacked, stumble and fall, break a bone. Or, what's a more specific threat at the moment?
The hunter could kill.
The hunter, right? The hunter. So I come from Utah, and that's where I live. And we have these beautiful trails outside of our house. Just 15 minutes drive, and you can get into a canyon, and you can walk alongside a river or stream. You can walk uphill or on the floor of the valley. It's wonderful. But one thing we know, we are told again and again, is that there are two types of trails in the wilderness. There's the ones for you to walk on, and there's the ones made for hunters. And you need to know which one you're going on. One time, we decided to explore, my family and I, and we went off into the mountains and found a beautiful turnoff and said, let's just explore. And so we went down the path and missed the sign that said, warning, hunters. And we had gone 5 minutes down that path before. Boom, boom, boom. And boy, did we turn around and run as fast as we could back to the car, right? That's a real danger. And what are they looking for? Things that move in the trees. And Narada Muni was exactly that. At the moment, he was a potential target. So, in any kind of mentorship relationship, there's an element of risk involved. And I want to point back to what you said about vulnerability, right? That when we enter into a relationship with someone, as a mentee or a mentor, we are taking a risk in that situation. Why? Because in order for that relationship to work, we have to make ourselves vulnerable. We have to make ourselves open to that person helping us. And if we make ourselves open to them helping us, then we're making ourselves open to them hurting us as well. Because you can't be helped without the same space that you open up for help and for love is the same space you open up for hurt and for pain. And so that vulnerability is a great risk that we take, either when we mentor or when we are mentored, in both directions. And Narada Muni exemplifies that willingness to take a risk, to say, I'm going to see what's out there and what's happening because these animals need my help. In fact, when Mrigari sees Narada Muni, the first thing he tells him is he says, why did you go leave the path? Why did you go off the path? You have just scared away the animals that I was targeting. This jungle, the trackless jungle, is my space. That path over there is for you. So as we might say in English, stay in your lane. Stay in your lane. And that's precisely what a mentor refuses to do, is stay in their lane. If Narada Muni had stayed in his lane, then Mrigari would not have been helped. The animals would not have been helped. No one would have received benefit. No one would have been received benefit. No one would have been benefited, but he would have been safe, right? In that situation. He would have been right in that situation. You see, from a Vaishnava perspective, a devotee of Krishna is interested in more than just being right. We're interested in being kind and compassionate. Righteousness is a very low bar for a Vaishnava. Think about this. If Prabhupada had stayed in his lane, where would we have been today? Right? His lane, his path was Vrindaban. That's the place for saints and sadhus in India. It's the right place to be because it's good association. It's peaceful. You can easily get what you need to live, which is not much. Everyone is willing to help a saintly person in Vrindaban. And Prabhupada would have stayed there and things would have been very peaceful. And would anyone have blamed him for doing that? No. No, he would have been, that's the amazing thing. He would have been fully righteous and blameless. And yet, not a Vaishnava. A Vaishnava, maybe even a Vaishnava, but not the caliber of person we know as Prabhupada. The reason we know him as he is because he was willing to not stay in his lane, right? To leave the path and say, I'm going to do not just what's right, but what's good, what's kind, what's compassionate. And that takes a sense of mission, right? That takes leaving our comfort zone. That's the call that we have, is to ask ourselves, this is right, this is comfortable, this is righteous, and then over here is what's compassionate, what's kind, what's actually going to stretch me to my capabilities for Krishna. And when we take that risk out of compassion, put aside goodness for the sake of compassion, then we know, not put aside, go beyond, supersede. Then we're in the realm of actual mentorship in that regard. Okay? So Narada Muni heads out, and Mrigai says, why did you leave the path? Stay in your lane. And Mrigai wants to issue a volley of profanities at Narada Muni. That's what he wants to do. And normally he has no hesitation in doing that. But on this particular occasion, all that comes out of his mouth is, my dear sir, what can I do for you? That's all he can say. My dear sir, what can I do for you? And he's actually shocked at himself. He's surprised at himself. Why he's acting like a gentleman when he had no intention of doing so. And the reason for that is the third element of mentorship, that we see in this story, which is character. He is not able to abuse Narada Muni with his words because he sees someone of character before him. This is Narada Muni's greatest weapon. It's not his knowledge, it's not his mantras, it's not his yogic shaktis, his powers, no. His greatest weapon, not just here, but in so many stories, is his character. Even when he visits the home of evil people who are just like outright bad, right? Not just bad people, good people in a bad circumstance, like really terrible people. He shows up there and they still say nice things to him, even besides themselves, even though they don't want to, because they recognize this is someone of character. Someone who's not here for himself, but for me. Wants to help me in some way. We teach by our character. We lead by our character. We mentor by our character. In the end, everything can be taken away from us. Our money, our knowledge. We forget things all the time. All the tools we have can be taken away from us. The thing that we cannot lose is our character. That no one else can take away. We can lose it, but no one can take that away from us. This is often called, in teaching, it's often called the hidden curriculum. The hidden curriculum, there's the obvious curriculum, that's what goes in the syllabus. By the end of this course, you will be able to A, B, C, and D, right? What's unsaid is a couple of years from after this course, you will no longer be able to do A, B, C, and D because you will have forgotten all. Right? That's also true, and every professor knows that. What never goes away is the hidden truth. That's the professor's attitude towards the subject. That's the professor modeling how we enter this subject. And if that is done well, that never leaves us to it. That enthusiasm, that energy, that dedication, the compassion, the character that was present. Okay. So he says, Mrigai says, my dear sir, what can I do for you? Would you like some furs? I have a lot of them. And Nanda says, no, I don't need any furs. I just need one thing from you. And he says, sure, whatever it might be. I'm happy to do it if I can. And Narada says, I just want you to kill the animals fully. Don't half kill them. Kill the animals fully. Now, I want you to reflect on that instruction from Narada Muni. We know that Vaishnavas rarely advocate the killing of animals. In fact, we spend a lot of time telling people not to kill animals. A vegetarian diet, and be peaceful, and be compassionate, and ahimsa, or non-violence as a value. So take his statement out of context for a minute, and just make a bumper sticker out of it. A teaching from one of our great sages, kill the animals. Kill them fully, right? It sounds horrific. It sounds terrible. In fact, there's another story in Bhagavatam where Narada Muni tells a king who is performing Vedic sacrifices that involve killing of animals to stop. He says, what do you think you're going to get? What positive good is going to come by shedding the blood of another living being in the name of God? Temple sacrifice. If you want to kill animals, this is pretty much the best way to do it. And Narada Muni says, no, don't, stop, don't do this. But here, in the case of this hunter, he's saying, kill the animals fully, please. Why? Why does he give this otherwise terrible instruction?
Compassion.
Compassion. Why is this an example of compassion? Killing the animals sounds very, very mean.
Minimize the violence. It's superior to suffering.
It's superior to suffering, right? It's better than the other alternative that was happening. Why not just tell him to stop killing the animals altogether?
He's not ready to listen. He's not ready to listen.
Yeah. It's because we need to know what and someone said this earlier in our earlier discussion, the advice needs to be practical. Someone over there said it needs to be practical, right? It needs to be relevant to a person's own circumstance, where they're at. I think many of you actually pointed to that. Once again, just because something is right is not enough. There's a definition of truth given in, the second verse of Srimad Bhagavatam, which says, the highest truth is reality distinguished from illusion for the welfare of all. Okay? And it's that second part which is really crucial. Don't kill the animals would have been reality distinguished from illusion. That's truth. Don't kill the animals. That's truly the right instruction. But was it something that Mrigari would have been able to handle at this point? No. He was in the practice of half killing animals and watching them suffer. Just killing them fully was a big step towards Krishna. It was a big step forward. Even though otherwise, from an outside perspective, from outside that context, it sounds opposite to Vaishnava teaching. For him, it was in the right direction. One of my mentors, when I was first starting to teach, told me, she said, Ravi, you have to remember, always teach the students you have, not the students you wish you had. And I've always remembered that this whole time, right? 20 years. Teach the student you have, not the students you wish you had. Don't create an imaginary audience and teach them. Wherever they're at, that's where we meet them. Whether we are a mentee looking for a mentor, or a mentor who has been asked to mentor others, we need to ask ourselves, where am I at? Where am I at? And how can I help this person take one step forward? Even if it's not where I think he ought to be, or what I think the truth might be. Being right is not enough. We have to be compassionate. Okay, so Narada Muni says, okay, kill the animals fully. And at this point, Mrigati says, I don't understand. Why? My name is Mrigati, enemy of the animals. My father taught me how to kill like this. It's our family tradition. What's wrong? And this is the point. At this point, this is the first time in the story where Narada Muni actually says something difficult to swallow, something that challenges him. The reason he can say this is because he's done all this to build trust. It takes this much for Mrigati to know that he can trust this man out of the blue who's showing up, telling him to change his life, or he will tell him soon. But there's enough trust in that relationship. He knows that Narada Muni is not here because he wants some furs from me. He knows that the only reason he's here and he's taken a risk is for me. That he's not just interested in being right, he's actually interested in being kind. So Narada Muni tells him, you are creating a future for yourself that is not very happy by giving pain to other living beings. He shows him, he gives him a vision for what, and I don't mean that literally. The story doesn't have like dramatic magic visions or things. He just tells him. He shows him by his words what kind of future he's creating for himself by harming animals, unsuspecting, innocent animals. And Mrigati is horrified with this. He says, what can I do? Tell me. What can I do to prevent this? I want to do something. This goes back to the point, I forget who said it, maybe it was Nanda Raja who said it, but it was that even in correcting, a mentor doesn't destroy, doesn't demoralize, but uplifts. Mrigati at this point, in hearing the type of future he's creating for himself, feels not a sense of hopelessness or even self-disgust. Rather, he feels empowered. He says, I want to do something about this, and I know you can tell me what I need to do. Right? He's feeling determined, and that's where you see that correction is really hitting home. At this point, Narada Muni could have told him, you sinner, look at your situation. Look at how horrible you are. Look at your life. Living out here in the forest. And no, he didn't tell him that. He didn't tell him that he was miserable. Rather, what he told him is he had an opportunity to change a miserable future. And that's the right way to use karma. That's the right way to talk about karma. As a way to empower a person. That correction empowers him. And Mrigati says, what do I do? And now we come back to this point here about guidance and about not just what we may want, but also what's good for us. And when he says, I want you to break your bow. I want you to break your bow. And Mrigati responds to that. How? He says, yes, sir, whatever you want. No, he doesn't say that. He says, how am I going to support my family? I have a family to support. I have myself to maintain. How am I going to do that if I break my bow? This is my livelihood. What's striking to me is the complete normalcy of Mrigati's response. He doesn't respond as one who's evil. He doesn't respond as someone who's a great saint. He just responds in a very human way. If someone came to me tomorrow and said, you know, this is what you need to do to improve your life. Smash your laptop. Break it. What would I say? I would say, that's great. I'd love to follow you around, but who's going to support my family? That laptop is my livelihood. I can't do that. And plus, it belongs to the university. And they're going to charge me. He's completely normal in his reply. And how does Narada Muni respond to that? He says, don't worry, Krishna will maintain you, protect you. No, he doesn't say that. He says, fasting is good for you. Why are you worried about food? It's healthy. No, he doesn't say that. He could, right? He could. I'm sure Narada Muni does a lot of fasting himself. I am sure he completely depends on Krishna for his maintenance. But he doesn't say either of those things to him. He doesn't say, he doesn't say, why are you attached to your family? They're temporary anyway. And you probably had a different family in your last life, not in your family in your next life. All of those things I just said are true. They're true, right? But are they good? Are they beneficial for this person? Maybe for some other person, but for Mrigari, are they beneficial? No. Remember, not enough to be right. Okay, not enough to be right. So Narada Muni responds, not as a great sage, but just as a human being. He tells him, don't worry, I will provide you food. I will make sure that you get enough food for you and your family every day. And that leads us to our next point, which is not only where our audience is at, what their capacity is, but also what our mentee needs. Right? What they need. Narada Muni is thoroughly human in this situation. And at this point, because there's been such a trust developed, there's been vulnerability on both sides. Right? Narada Muni was vulnerable, leaving the path of the forest, taking a risk, opening himself up to danger. And Mrigari was very vulnerable in sharing his pain and his worry about his future with Narada Muni. Because that happened, both directions, he's ready to trust him. And he says, okay, if you say there's going to be enough food, I trust you. Is he trusting in Krishna at this point? No. That'll happen, but not now. He's just trusting in his mentor. When Narada Muni comes back, whatever it is, I don't remember now, 6 months, a year, sometime later. He comes back, he's traveling with Bhargavata Muni. They often travel together, they're good friends. And Narada Muni's coming over this place again, and it says, I have a student here. Let's go visit him and see how he's doing. And Bhargavata Muni says, sure. And when they go visit him, Mrigari comes running over to see his teacher, his mentor, his guru. And the very first question that Narada Muni asks him, do you know what it is? How's your sadhana going? How's your 16 rounds? How's your study of scripture? No. How is Tulsi doing? The sacred plant under which you chant every day. How's your deity worship? All all of those would have been good questions, right? They're the right sort of questions for a guru to ask. But you know what he actually asked them? Is there enough food? After all that time, he picks up the conversation exactly where he left off. I promise you I'd bring enough food. Do you have enough food? And it's at this point that Mrigai is able to say, please don't send so much food. There's way too much. I don't know what to do with this. I'm handing it out to everyone. Now he's ready to fast. Now he's ready to depend on Krishna. Now he's not worried. All those things that Narada Muni could have told him back then, don't be so attached. You should fast, depend on Krishna. All those things he could have told him, he didn't tell him. Those things are now real. On his own. He's now in a different place. And he's able to tell his guru, there's too much food. I don't need this much. Right? He's not hoarding, he's not storing. He's happy to live depending on Krishna. Okay. So, there it is, right? An example of mentorship from Vaishnava literature. An example of compassion as the motivation. Risk and vulnerability as the heart of that relationship. Character as its very foundation that allows that trust to develop. And then the application of it thoroughly focused on the other. And this is the heart of the mentoring relationship, is that it is radically focused on the other. When we mentor, we have this tendency to want to make our mentee just like ourselves. Why? Because A, we think very highly of ourselves. B, we're thinking, if it worked for me, it'll work for them. And is that true? Probably not. Maybe to some extent, but in other ways not. Okay. So, we have a little bit of time. I want to make sure we have enough time for the other side, which is, what are the potential pitfalls of a mentor-mentee relationship? How can things go wrong? Because remember I said that this is one of the most powerful transformative relationships we can have. And by the same token, it's also one of the most destructive, abusive relationships we can have. So, if we had more time, I would ask you to go into pairs and to talk about where things could go wrong. I hope you will do that in your own time, to think through examples, instances, stories. Perhaps you have experienced, perhaps you have heard or seen others experience. Where can things go wrong in that relationship? But given that we don't have that much time, let me point out a few things that I wanted to share and then see if you have any thoughts or questions that we might add to it. Okay, so, the first thing, the first potential pitfall is recognizing as a mentor that this is not about me. This relationship is not about me. Remember I said that trust is the most important currency in making that relationship work. It's also one of the greatest openings to risk or to hurt in that relationship. Because mentorship is based on trust, unlike the other transactional relationships I described, right? Like my relationship with my employer is based on money, not on trust. Well, some level of trust, yes. But there's other things that keep things going. Because mentorship is wholly founded on trust, it's very easy recognizing a mentee's trust to say, trust in me. Trust in me. I am the object of your trust. And for the mentor to make themselves so large in front of the mentee that they can see nothing beyond their mentor. They cannot even see themselves. That type of overwhelming presence of the mentor is essentially a breakdown of that mentor-mentee relationship. It turns it into an exclusive focus on that person. A mentoring relationship, particularly in a Vaishnava context, is not about trust in me, but trust in Krishna and in your ability to serve Krishna, in your ability to act for Krishna. And here's the ironic part. If we point trust in this direction to Krishna rather than here, guess what happens? The person's trust in us grows. They truly trust us. By virtue of the fact that we're not asking for that trust. We're not demanding that trust. By pointing them to say, here's your well-wisher, right? Here's the person who's going to help you. And you trust in your ability to serve them. That person says, I can trust you. Because you're not in it for yourself. You're not gaining anything in this relationship. Another side to that coin is for us to recognize our own limitations as a mentor. There can be a pressure. If this person looks up to me, I'm going to be everything to this person. I'm going to be their counselor. I'm going to be their spiritual leader. I'm going to be their career guide. I'm going to do it all. Because after all, they trust me. And they look up to me and they see that I'm so wonderful. A big part of mentoring is recognizing our own limitations. I can help this person in this area, but here I have no experience. And sometimes the best thing we can do as a mentor is to send someone to someone else. To connect them with someone who can truly help them in that circumstance. And not try to be everything to everyone. To recognize, this is as far as I could help. Now, I'm going to connect them. I'm going to lead them. I'm going to guide them to someone else who can help. I'm not actually a counselor myself, or I know nothing about how marriages work. So I'm going to help them find someone who can actually guide in that regard, rather than dispensing advice. Recognizing that even though they come to us for help, they are not like me. They are different. They need different sets of help. There's wonderful examples in this regard in Srila Prabhupada of mentors recognizing their limitations and not and allowing that person to grow elsewhere. But I'll hold off on those for just a moment because of time. Okay, the third element, there's only four. The third potential pitfall. This comes from both sides, mentor and mentee. And that's fear. First, from the side of the mentor. Sometimes when we come to a point where someone is asking us for mentorship or guidance, the biggest thing that can hold us back, if it's not pride, or if it's not a sense of all-powerful, I can do everything, And sometimes it's the opposite challenge, is fear. I'm not good enough. I'm not good enough to help this person. I don't know enough. I'm not senior enough. I'm not enough. I'm not pure enough. I'm not devoted enough. And all of that is probably true. And yet, Lord Chaitanya also in the same book, Chaitanya Charitamrita, he tells us specifically, he says, I want everyone to serve in this capacity, to recognize that this is just a service. That's all it is. Mentoring someone, helping someone is just a service. It's not being their boss. It's not being the Lord and controller. That's all for Krishna. It's just one way to help. And like any service, it's not everything. It's not the best service. And we don't have to do it perfectly. Just like if you were cooking for Krishna, it would be unreasonable to expect yourself to be a perfect cook, right? There are times at which it's going to not come out right. But as long as your intention is in the right place, and really trying to serve Krishna, and to serve the devotees through a nice meal, it's okay, right? In the same way, mentorship, we may not always get it right. We may not always be perfect. But rather than have that fear of failure paralyze us, or that sense of inadequacy paralyze us, we recognize as long as I'm genuinely trying to help this person, and I have the humility to recognize what my limitations are, it'll be okay. There's a big difference between humility and low self-esteem. Humility empowers us. Why? Because we recognize I'm very small, but Krishna's great, and he can do miracles if he wants me to do this. Low self-esteem is paralyzing. I'm no good at all, and I can't do anything. Humility is focused on God. Low self-esteem is focused on me. Humility says, God is great, and therefore, I'm very small. Low self-esteem says, I am terrible. I am no good. I'm not expert. I'm not useful. I'm not interesting. It's all focused on me. The two are actually at opposite ends in their effect. Humility, true humility, leads to fearlessness. Low self-esteem paralyzes us with fear of failure. From the mentee side, there can also be a major element of fear that holds us back. And that's often a result of, will I be able to commit myself? And what if I disappoint? This person is investing so much time and energy in me. And I'm growing attached to them. And what if I disappoint? What if I can't live up to their expectations? What if I do something wrong? Okay, so in both of these situations, humility is the key, and lower self-esteem is our challenge. Okay, last thing, this is a smaller point, but it's still very important. I think one thing to remember for both mentors and mentees is that mentorship rarely happens in a grand, dramatic fashion. In the movies, it always happens in a dramatic fashion. Right? This is part of the hero's journey. The person is at their very lowest, and then someone shows up and empowers them. And they rise up and they achieve great success. Because there's this moment at which everything changes, everything turns. Maybe. Maybe it might happen like this in your life. Usually, it's very little small steps. It's not dramatic. It's not grand in its nature. How many of you have seen The Lion King? The Lion King, yeah, everyone. Okay, the original one. I haven't seen the remake, but the original one. That's the one I saw years and years ago. And there's this moment where, you know Simba, he's the prince who has left because of feeling like he killed his father. He's feeling inadequate and lost, and he's away from his kingdom, from the Pride Lands. And one day, as he's just bumbling about, he meets his soon-to-be mentor, Rafiki, right, which in Swahili means friend. He meets Rafiki, and Rafiki says, your father is still alive. And Simba says, no, he's not alive. You're wrong. He says, yes, he is. I can show you. Come, follow Rafiki. And Rafiki ducks down into a thicket of dense bushes. And Simba ducks down into that thicket. And just for one moment, he looks back at where he's coming from, at the camera. And there's this moment where he thinks, he knows somewhere inside, my life is going to be different if I follow this guy down the thicket. And it's a risk he's taking. It's a big risk. Because he could be being led into a trap. This happens with lions. And he ducks into the thicket, and he follows him, and he follows him, and he follows him. And he points down. When they get to the bottom, there's this lake, and Rafiki points down, and he says, look there. And Simba looks down, and he looks down, and all he sees is his own reflection. And he comes back and says, that's not my father, that's just me. And he says, no, you don't know, look harder, look harder. And he looks again, and then all of a sudden, he sees his father there. And then he looks up in the sky, and the clouds change, and his father's face shows up. And he says, you have forgotten me, my son. And he says, no, father, I could never forget you. He says, yes, you have forgotten yourself, and therefore you have forgotten me. And this is very beautiful. It's like Upanishadic Bhagavad Gita. And then, you have forgotten yourself, therefore you have forgotten me. Know yourself. And then it turns Christian. He says, you are my son, the one true king. And Simba's life changes. Okay. So it's a moment of glory, and if it happens like that in your life, terrific. But I just want to say, for most people, it's not like that. The clouds don't change, you don't bump into your mentor, you don't enter a thicket. It's just a gradual process of getting to know someone, of trusting them. It takes a while, and it's worth the journey. Thank you very much for your attention.
West side of this country. But thanks for coming all over here for this. Another round of applause for Prabhupada. Next we have Bhakti Maharaj speaking on conscious kirtan. Can you give a short break, Maharaj, before we? Do you want to lead us into a workout?
That's part of what